Hey friends, today we're going to talk about an interesting concept, which is what the startup world can learn from the movie industry. You might be wondering, what do these two industries have in common? Well, when you think about it, both the movie industry and startups are expert at hiding all the ugly behind the scenes work and only showcasing what the audience or users need to see. Think about the messy studio setups and the clever camera angles that make everything look polished. Just behind me, you can see a clean background, but in front of me, it's just a bunch of microphone, lights, and camera, and so on. I also applied these principles to my own startup, SewaYou, a location-based language exchange app. Over time, building my startup for over 5 years as a solo founder, I focus on the final rendering, what the users actually see, and the tools I need to create a satisfying experience. In this video, we'll focus on the importance of prioritizing the front-facing aspects of your product, accepting the inevitable ugliness of the backend, and most importantly, avoiding the trap of premature optimization. Just look at Facebook. Even a giant tech like this still has tons of not frequently accessed pages with ugly UI and old codes running on PHP. Alright, let's talk first about the behind the scene of a product. Young and first-time founders, and I've been there and done that, and we tend to prioritize the beauty of our code, if such things even exist. Back in the early days of building my app SewaYou, I was so obsessed to write unit tests, backend server tests, API response tests, and all the stuff that your non-existing users don't even care. I remember wanting to push the test coverage percentage to at least 80% for every single new feature I added. And then I ended up deprecating tons of unused features for my app because the market didn't respond well to those features or the features weren't useful. So writing tests for premature features that haven't stand the test of time is just time wasted. I was also reading tons of blog articles about best practices or whatever the newest, shiniest frameworks I was learning at that time, searching for naming convention, or should I comment my code using multiple lines or put everything in a single line, or how to organize my project folder, and so on. You know, all the nitty-gritty that software engineers like to play around with. As a pure developer, it's awesome to be able to write clean code and have everything tidied up. It's like your baby, you know. But over years, with a little hindsight, all those efforts didn't push much forward the business. When you build a startup, you should optimize for speed in order to validate or invalidate your ideas and hypotheses as quickly as possible so you can move on to work on the next crucial thing. Even if you're a technical startup founder, your job is not to write code, let alone good code, but to use code to make your idea become a reality so that your product can be on real users' hand. Code is just another tool in your startup weapon, similarly to social media, for example, just a tool to grow your product. That little mindset shift helped me detach a little bit myself from my code base, so I wouldn't feel bad if my code is a little bit clunky or spaghetti. It's hard for me as a technical founder who wrote the entire app code base, but product building is just one part of building a startup. You have to take care of the marketing, the legal side, finance. Obviously, you might need funding, so investors' relationships is as important as writing code. If your single job is doing software engineering, then getting details right is great. But if you're a technical founder like me, here are a few things I stopped putting too much emotional attachment and that I am okay with and my frameworks around it. First principle is that spaghetti code is sometimes okay. Like they said, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Unless your code structure and the way you architect things slow you down, don't spend more time refactoring again and again your code, or migrate to the newest and latest packages. This is purely back office stuff. Your users won't notice your efforts. Another one is that duct taping is okay. Your engineering team might be the only ones who care about the ugliness of your CSS files. As long as the user experience is smooth, nobody cares whether you're using the block element modifier naming conventions to name your CSS class, or you're using Tailwind or fancy libraries like style component and so on. Tech stack choices. I still heard some people comfortably using jQuery or Ruby on Rails in all their side projects and even host their MVP web app on DigitalOcean and so on. This is an outdated way to see things. Nowadays, there's so much more efficient tools that have low learning curve as the tech stack you're already familiar with. Also, it will drastically help you speed up your app development. Pick stuff like React and the Next.js framework and deploy that to Vercel and then get it done. Do not be too much old school neither, because if your MVP works, you end up having to rewrite the entire thing using something different instead of just refactoring. A tech stack needs to have a strong ecosystem around it. Check out open source packages, GitHub issues, and Stack Overflow questions if it still even exists on the topic. Workaround is okay. Sometimes it's easier to implement psychology solutions to improve the perceived value of a product rather than trying to implement the hardcore technical value solution. I mentioned that in a previous video, but for example, it's cheaper and more efficient to make a trip 20% more enjoyable by offering like free snacks, better service, than to make the train go 20% faster. Another example is Uber, that makes waiting for the cabs less frustrating by showing a real-time map of the drivers. You can see that it's technically way easier to show the map rather than over-optimize stuff like finding more drivers in a specific area or even doing like machine learning stuff to find the shortest path, etc. And you get my point. Repetitive code is okay. When adding new features, focus on code that serves the purpose of validating the feature hypothesis. Once confirmed, you can write better code, make it more modularized, and so on. Try to isolate new codes and architect it so new features can stay independent and can be easily deprecated if needed. Not writing tests is okay. Quick confession here. So I used to write tests for like literally everything. Now I write like nothing. Instead of writing tests, I have real-time error tracking and type-safe codebase, so that's it. If you still want to write tests, choose to test only the most crucial parts of your app and the hot paths, that is, the most used screen or pages. If there's one test to prioritize, it's end-to-end testing. Integrate testing into your CI/CD pipeline, but be aware of challenges in areas like authentication. I find it sometimes impossible to write tests for those things that actually reflect the real production environment. Like, you cannot test Apple's sign-in as if it was the exact same mechanism than the one in production on a simulator. Or there might be things that break in production because it requires a different hashing algo key like SHA-256 that you can only get once release your app on the Google Play Store. And at one point, your users actually will tell you what's buggy and what's broken so that you know what to fix. So what does all of this has to do with the media or movie industry? Take a look at some YouTubers. Think about all the messy studio setups and the clever camera angle that makes everything look polished. On camera, everything looks nice, but behind the scene, they might shoot the video in a tiny, cluttered, and messy room. Mine is pretty clean, but nobody cares because nobody can see it. But the things that they double down on are what can be seen on camera and the content itself. You have a tiny camera? No problem. Buy camera lens that make your room look wider and make the background blurry so that it feels like a cinematic video. You have a dark room or your room cannot get sunlight? No problem. Buy lighting equipment like this one and you can film at any time of the day. Everyone knows that there are low production videos that get tons of views and engagement. Similarly, there are out there crappy product that gets tons of customers simply because a better alternative still doesn't exist or because the product is so well distributed. And even in movies, most special effects are done using green screen. In science fiction movies, there are sounds of like weird animals that you cannot go to capture because they simply don't exist. So instead, movie producers just create fake sound effects using whatever sounds similar or whatever they have at disposal. So think of all the equipment and gears in the movie industry as a workaround, duct taping your product from a product point of view. So you need to prioritize the front end, the things that is in direct contact with your users or customers, and put less efforts in things that don't matter in the backstage. So before adding another line of code to your product, ask yourself, does this add direct value to your users? Is it just for the engineering team's satisfaction? What stage is your startup in? Validating hypothesis or accelerating growth? For the latter, you might have to think more about the backend stuff in order to scale and stabilize the product and optimize for performance. So tailor your development workflow to your current stage. Or asking yourself, Can this be done in a cheaper or more creative way? Don't forget that in a startup, engineering time is the most expensive one. So remember, what's important is how people perceive your product, not what's behind it. So hide the ugly behind the scenes and focus on what users see and experience. The movie industry has mastered this art, and startup can learn a thing or two from them. Adding new features to your product have made a hidden cost that you might not be aware of, and I covered all these costs in this video here. If you're interested, just check it out. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and hit that bell notification for more similar contents of the startup lessons I've learned while building mine. Also follow my Instagram for more behind the scene of building a startup as a foreigner in Japan. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one. Bye.